Welcome, friends. So great to see so many of you here. Hi, you doing? Vicky, Elaine, Philippe, Laurel, Eileen, Marion, Robin, Gerard, Heidi, Arjun, good to see you. Tony, I see you in there. And gosh, many, many more loading in. So thank you so much for joining us today for the free Lucid Life series. This is our third conversation we're having, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation with Charlie Morley. For any of you who've been working with me, you know that Charlie Morley played a really significant part in my own personal lucid dreaming journey. When I first started out, when I was going through that crazy phase of being terrified of death, trying to figure it out, going into my dreams, I was fortunate enough to work one-to-one with Charlie, and he was able to guide me through those really intricate, personal, wild experiences, especially touching into working with transformation of fear, working with summoning and integrating aspects of the shadow, which is what we're going to be talking about today. But I know many of you, most of you are very familiar with Charlie, of course. His contributions to lucid dreaming and to shadow work have been invaluable. But for those who don't know the full breadth and scope, I just want to give them a quick introduction in. So obviously Charlie is a best-selling author. I think I've probably given out about 20 something copies of his books to my clients and to my friends. They're my favorite books in terms of really introducing people into lucid dreaming within a spiritual context specifically. And he's an international teacher and he's a coach and really specializing in lucid dreaming and shadow work and what he calls mindfulness of dream and sleep. So a broader set of practices which really relate to how he's grounded his training in dream yoga. And so as Charlie was into this when he was really young, he actually went, formally into Buddhism, I think around 18, 19. And you went and you lived at I think I'm going to get this right. I think it was the Buddhist center, Kagyu Samye Dzong Buddhist Center in London. And Charlie lived there for 7 years and really trained and was authorized to teach in this tradition by Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, who I know many of you have also studied with and read with. And so this is 25 years now of experience in lucid dreaming. And he runs retreats all over the world that really work with both lucid dreaming, but also shadow work. His books really have gone into this aspect of working with our subconscious, working with the unconscious mind too, and created a sort of a holistic system they call mindfulness of dream and sleep, which includes and integrates the Tibetan Buddhist dream yoga traditions, as well as this contemporary psychological approach. And for those who've been following along, he played a role in those amazing studies on PTSD. So working with veterans and survivors of sexual abuse and looking at how lucid dreaming can have, really dramatic impacts on supporting people who are suffering from PTSD. This is really, really important work. So really excited, obviously, to work with Charlie. One more note is that personal story. This last summer, I went to one of Charlie's retreats in Holy Island, Scotland. And I was really fortunate because I took my husband and my stepdaughter, who's 16. And you can try and imagine. So my stepdaughter lives in Scotland. So we said to her, hey, listen, do you want to go to this like lucid dreaming and shadow work retreat? I don't know if you have kids, but taking a 16-year-old to a epic shadow work retreat where she's the youngest participant by far. And we went into this amazing Buddhist retreat center where Charlie hosts his retreat in Scotland. And we were there for, immersed in for like 5 days. And I tell you what, that experience to do it as a family, to go and facilitate it under Charlie's care, he was able to give myself, my husband, and my stepdaughter, Alexa, the most unbelievable experience. And being able to work honestly and share our fears and share our projections and our wounds with each other as a family unit was really life-changing. And so I just want to start by saying thank you, Charlie, for all the wonderful support you have given me over the years. And I'm excited to have this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you for the lovely introduction. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with you over this time and also to know you personally as a friend. I was listening to this Buddhist podcast recently, Guru Viking, by the way. If you haven't heard it, check it out. It's the one I listen to almost religiously. And Glenn Scott Mullen was there, and he was talking about the requirements for a teacher in the Buddhist lineage. Of course, there's a whole thing of authorization, but apart from authorization, the three qualities that were required were that you have lineage, so you have good teacher, you have and a connection to that teacher, you can do the practice, and that you're better at the practice than the people you teach. And I was, that's a really kind of interesting way of putting it. And I don't know how much Mia shares of her own dreams in this group, but Mia is a seriously proficient lucid dreamer, like way better than me. as in like her frequency, her ability to stay in the dream, her ability to create
Not
dream
that it's a
plans and
competition,
execute them.
Charlie. Yeah, Charlie and
Um,
I keep a log and we just compare notes every week.
it's not even like that. Mia would be absolutely killing the me in any competition. I just don't know how much she shares. You know, she probably keeps it humble. Mia's a very, very proficient lucid dreamer, and you should know that when you're working with her. I think this is, you know, you can't. Actually, you can. In the UK, you can get a master's degree in lucid dreaming, and there is no practical component. So you can be a master of lucid dreaming, having never had a lucid dream. In my world, and I believe in your world too, you know, this isn't a theoretical practice unless you have tasted the chocolate and know how to get into the factory and you know get that chocolate again and again. It's I question people who are teaching it from a theoretical point of view. Mia is really good at this practice. I've seen that from someone who's worked with her personally, so you can really, you know, trust her from a very practical point of view.
Thank you, Charlie. And it's great because I know today what we're getting into with the shadow work stuff, I think that is especially important because I know for many of us here, when we think about working with the shadow, obviously there's a degree of excitement, like, wow, it sounds cool. But also the shadow brings up ideas that might conjure fear or
Mhm.
shame. And so I think having had personal experience in what we're about to teach is really, really vital because as Charlie and I will share, I mean, we've walked this in a very we've failed and tried and figured it out and retried so many times together that hopefully some of that experience and that insight will be helpful to you. But maybe Charlie, just to start, just to make sure everyone's on the same page about what we mean when we say shadow work, could you just kind of give us a high level on what is the shadow? When you're talking about shadow work, what are you referring to?
Yeah, and so nice to begin a talk where someone's not asking me to define lucid dreaming. They're asking me to define shadow work. So this is lovely to be in this room where people are already aware of all that stuff. So the shadow was a term pioneered in the West by the famous Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. And he used the shadow to refer to the term the shadow to refer to any parts of the unconscious mind that we have repressed, denied, or disowned. He referred to the shadow as the dark side of the human psyche. But crucially, not dark meaning bad or evil or malign, dark meaning yet to be illuminated. So it is the parts of our mind that we have not yet shone a light of conscious awareness into. And the shadow is, again, anything repressed, denied, disowned. So we might start thinking about the dark shadow, these elements of the shadow that might have destructive potentials to them. So our prejudices, our fears, our phobias, our traumas, our isms, our projections, our judgments of ourselves and others. These are things that we hide from ourselves and others, right? That we feel ashamed of, that we feel guilt around. And also, a great quote from Jung that hardly anyone seems to share on Instagram, as they do the more common ones, is the shadow is 90% pure gold. Jung said the shadow is 90% pure gold. And that 10% that isn't pure gold, he said, was the Nagaro, which, of course, in alchemy is the stuff that you transmute into gold. So the shadow contains just as much constructive as it does destructive potentials. Like, think about how much we hide within ourselves from others that is really constructive. Like, who here hides elements of their spiritual side for fear of being labeled too woo woo? Just me? Like classic golden shadow. It's something we repress, deny, disown, something we're ashamed to express fully among others, and yet it is so constructive. What could be more constructive than our spiritual side? Or perhaps it's parts of our sexuality. What could be more constructive and creative and expressive than our natural sexuality? But perhaps we've been brought up in a society where we had to repress or suppress elements of our sexuality. That would be in the shadow. So the shadow is not like good, good, bad. And it's not even really dark golden, it's just suppressed energy.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of practices we can do in the daytime to help integrate the shadow. I just did a book about this, the kind of daytime shadow integration practices. And also, one of the most powerful ways we can work with the shadow is through our dreams, especially our lucid dreams. Because in a lucid dream, as you all know, psychological concepts become personified, right? They become like you can meet them, you can meet your fear, you can meet your shame, and of course, in this case, you can literally meet your shadow.
So maybe I love like tapping into this overlap between the shadow and our dreaming minds. Because from what you're sharing, just kind of double clicking on that, knowing that the shadow is this kind of psychological soup of things we've pushed away, our shadows are going to be subjective, right? Each person's
Yeah.
shadow will look different. Like what I might have in my shadow, you might not have, and vice versa. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. So like the cool thing about becoming lucid is you can see like how your shadow shows up. But even before you become lucid, anytime you're in a dream and you meet something that repels you, that is most likely to be your shadow. So anytime you're in a dream, lucid or non-lucid, and you are repelled by a person or a situation, that will in most cases be representative of your shadow. So we could be repelled by something that's really scary and monstrous, right? Or something that's really violent or weirdly sexual or something. But also, have you ever been repelled by something that's incredibly bright? Have you ever met someone in a lucid dream that has such incredible spiritual power that you like dare not look at them? That would be an element of our golden shadow. But generally, it's what repels us. We will not want to go near our shadow when we meet it non-lucidly.
And so, because the shadow is living, like you're saying, you're pushing it down into the subconscious. Can you speak a little bit to, obviously the relationship between your dreams and accessing that content, why it makes both non-lucid and lucid dreaming a really interesting place to explore the shadow?
Yeah, so the what my teacher Rob Nairn would call the egocentric preference system, which is part of the subliminal network of the mind that keeps unwanted thoughts and feelings out of conscious awareness. In the daytime, it's constantly playing like whack-a-mole. You have a sexy thought, oh, get that out. We're not allowed to think about that. I have a racist thought, oh shit, God, that's not allowed. It's constantly playing whack-a-mole with these shadowy thoughts. But when we go to sleep at night, that sentinel, that egocentric preference system, which is playing whack-a-mole with unwanted shadowy thoughts, goes to sleep on the post. It's out for the count. So suddenly in our dreams, our shadow is expressed in a really uncensored way. So you want to know your shadow, look to your dreams, and you will see this emerging in the dreams. And in its greatest expression of dark shadow, it will be nightmares. So much of what we repress, deny, disown are our traumas, the things that have hurt us, the wounds that we've experienced. And our nightmares are like immune responses. When you cut yourself, the immune response is pain, right? The pain is like your body shouting to your brain saying, hey, I've cut myself. In many ways, a nightmare is the psyche, is the unconscious shouting to the conscious mind, hey, I'm wounded. So the dark shadow will express itself most readily in nightmares, and the golden shadow expresses itself most readily in what Jung would call big dreams, these archetypal dreams, dreams of huge archetypal significance. If like you're having, dinner with the Dalai Lama or something like that, or you find yourself like riding through the sky on a unicorn, looking down at your ancestors' gravestones, big kind of archetypal dream. This would be when our golden shadow expresses itself.
So then with shadow work, so now we know what the shadow is. Actually, I remember one of the clients I worked with when I first started working with them, he said to me, I want to work on my shadow. And I was like, okay, great, amazing. That's a really wonderful incentive to be doing lucid dreaming. He's like, yeah, there's a kind of a nightmare figure I've had since I was a child,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to finally kill him. I really want to go in. And I was like, ooh, we might have different understandings of shadow work. So maybe just to start, could you give us like what is the premise of skillful approaching working with transmutation of the shadow? What's the premise of that?
So, yeah, so the general idea is we don't want to get rid of the shadow. We want to transmute the shadow. The shadow is Jung called it the seat of all creativity. It's this huge libidinal energy. So we don't want to get rid of it. We don't want to dampen the power of the shadow. We want to use it. We want to transmute it. So this idea we have in the West of like, slay the dragon, right? We want to kill the dragon to get the pot of gold. This is the kind of old school view of the shadow being something bad. We want to get rid of it and get the pot of gold, which is, I don't know, being without the shadow, right? The Vajrayana view, and in fact, like the Tibetan Buddhist view, and of course, Jung was deeply into Tibetan Buddhism. He wrote the foreword for the first translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So he was totally knew about Tibetan Buddhism. He said, well, look, if you slay the dragon, then you get the pot of gold, but you've also got a dead dragon on your hands, like a rotting corpse of a dragon, like rotting in your psyche. So what about if you befriend the dragon? If you befriend the dragon, you still get the pot of gold, brilliant, but you've now got a freaking dragon on your side in the psyche. And anyone who's seen Game of Thrones will know if you've got dragons on your side, like anything is possible, right? So we don't want to slay the dragon. We don't want to kill the shadow. We don't want to get rid of it. We want to transmute the energy of the shadow onto the path of awakening. And to do that, we have to befriend it. We have to literally face our fears, or as Jung said, there is a moment where we must dance with the devil.
Mm.
And this is it. We dance with the shadow. He also had another thing about eating the shadow, literally gaining nourishment from the shadow. Um, uh, Eating it, you think it seems to disappear, right? But actually, you're taking this thing into you, and you're taking the nourishment, and then you are releasing what is no longer needed at the end. So we eat the shadow. We gain nourishment from it. We don't want to get rid of it.
I mean, it's incredible because it's such a different way of relating to the parts of ourselves that we instinctively dislike or are afraid
Yeah, it's
of or
totally
run from.
paradoxical.
So this
Yeah, you're
sounds
like,
like the
fuck that. I
shadow
don't want to
work.
make
Yeah, shadow work is
friends with
like,
that part of me. Yeah.
well, but also it's like even now in this world and with myself too, there are like sexy parts of my shadow that maybe I want to do the work on. Like everyone has like shadows that they're willing to work on. But this work can take us to parts of ourselves that are deeply, deeply uncomfortable too.
Yeah.
Parts of the shadow that we're like, well, I don't want to look at that part of it.
Yeah.
So before we kind of get into the sort of like more practical aspects of this, how would you speak to dealing with the deep fear, discomfort, revulsion that can come up for us when we start these practices?
Mm.
What do we
It's
need to
really
be prepared
natural.
to do?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to do is like it's really natural to have fear around shadow work. Like the shadow is created by fear. Fear, trauma, and shame are like these three big building blocks of the shadow. So totally normal to feel fear around doing this. And yet, what I'd say is it's something that most of us haven't tried yet. We've spent our whole life pushing away these parts, and they are still there. So why not give it a shot trying something else? And it does seem paradoxical. It is this kind of Vajrayana approach of the poison that cures the poison, or they say the peacock who eats the poison, and creates the plumage of the feathers. Um, the cool thing about doing shadow work in your lucid dreams, anyway, is that there's this inbuilt safety mechanism. Sometimes if people aren't ready to explore their shadow in the waking state, I say, well, see if you can look at it in your lucid dreams, because in the lucid dream, there is this built-in safety mechanism of like the ejector seat of waking up. Like, so in many ways, actually, exploring your shadow in the lucid dream is possibly even safer than exploring in the waking state, because you're allowing the dreamer to present you with what you're ready for. And another quote from Jung, and I'm quoting so much, but the shadow will only give you what you're ready for. So the shadow will only give you what you're ready for. The point of shadow integration is to move us out of the psychosis of an unintegrated shadow. So actually, the most sane thing we can do, like the greatest gift we can give ourselves and others, is an integrated shadow. Because in this archetypal theory, the shadow being out of whack is what leads us to be living a life with a psyche that's out of balance, like out of homeostasis. The shadow wants to be integrated, it wants to be known, and the mind wants to be balanced. But yeah, it's scary. If I had a chance of what to do in my lucid dreams, I'd rather like fly about, have sex with movie stars, do fun stuff, go surfing. And now there's this whole school that says, no, no, become lucid and call out for your greatest fear, or ask for a manifestation, a personified manifestation of your trauma to appear, and then embrace it. Like, screw that. I can totally see why this seems absolutely unappealing. And yet,
So maybe this is a good point to, I think it'd be worth exploring some of our stories around this because I think the theory of shadow work you can get like, okay, cool. But it can be hard to imagine how this works in practice because I know one of the great fears I have always held, I've seen this with a lot of people I work with too, which is that the fear that if I allow this part of me, this part of
mm,
me that I was taught is bad or I shouldn't show or is embarrassing or it makes other people uncomfortable, right? All the different reasons we are
mm,
taught to put those things away. The fear is if I let that come up, what if it consumes me? Or what if that's
mm,
who I become and then it's
mm,
broken? Or what if I cause all
mm.
this damage? Like the fears, right? So maybe Charlie,
Yeah.
would you be willing to share one of your stories to sort of help us map the arc of what actually does happen when we face and embrace these shadows in a lucid dream?
Yeah, sure. And also that, again, that's a really natural fear. We think that if we go to the places that scare us, that fear will consume us. But actually, this idea of the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. Like by moving towards what we're afraid of, that fear transmutes. Like these monstrous parts of ourselves are monstrous because they've been wounded. It is wounding that creates monsters. So to fight wounding with more wounding by not looking at it, by pushing it away, will allow it to stagnate. But if we move with love towards the parts of ourselves that are wounded, only good things can happen. Like love is the most powerful source in the whole universe. So to turn with love towards those wounded parts of ourselves is the safest thing we can possibly do. But the ego will tell us the opposite. It will say, no, no, I fight for my survival. This is a really kind of non-dual way of looking at the mind, right? And the ego is its like whole premise is duality. So shadow work and the kind of ego sense of shadow work will inherently question and push against the ego sense of power. Anyway, let's give some examples.
Mm.
Okay, let me give the first one. And I talk about this in my first TED talk over like 10 years ago. So I, as you kind of mentioned, I got authorized to teach lucid dreaming when I was quite young. I was like 25, and I had this weird thing that when I got authorized to teach, I don't know, it's such a stupid thing, but I thought that like at one point, Lama Yeshe or Rob Nairn, my other teacher, were going to ask to see my dream diary. And if I like wasn't having enough lucid dreams, or if I was like doing anything in the lucid dreams like sexual or like non-Buddhisty, I would get the sack. I didn't know how this worked. I was 25. I was completely out of my depth, right? So I started to become really like puritanical with my lucid dreams. Anytime anything sexual came up, I like literally looked the other way. Anytime anything kind of violent came up, I tried to turn it into angels and stuff. I guess my mind was in the right place, but I was engaging classic suppression and repression, which of course leads to the depression that comes from it. So I found that when I was doing this, my dreams were getting more and more kind of sexual and violent and all this kind of stuff. And I remember I was showing off to my Buddhist teacher once. I told him that this was happening. And I said, but don't worry, I've got it under control. I do this thing. I turn myself into Wolverine. And I had to explain who Wolverine was. And I said, oh, he's this super guy who's got like knives that come out of his hands. And I said, don't worry, I turn myself into Wolverine and I chop them to pieces. And he looked at me with this kind of look of like, dude, you have no idea what you're doing. And he said, I suggest you do the opposite of what you have been doing. These things are not externalized demons. There is nothing wrong with you. This is a manifestation of your shadow. You need to embrace the shadow. And that was the advice that I got. And then a few weeks later, I'd become lucid again. And there was this like it was like three in the TED talk. I say it was a three-headed demon. It actually wasn't. There were three bodies, but they were joined. It was too difficult to say that in the TED talk. There were these three bodies, like one female and two male, and they were like joined, like these Siamese triplets. And they appeared in the dream, and they came towards me, and I became lucid. And I was like, I'm dreaming, and they went, we don't care. And I was like, oh God, it's like the worst thing, right? And they're coming towards me, and I get ready to fight. And then I remember what Rob Nairn said. I was like, embrace the shadow. This has got to be my shadow. This is some like representation of a wounded part of me. So I moved towards them and I hugged them. And as I hugged them, they didn't just turn into light. They started biting me and stuff. And these three mouths are biting me. I was like, oh God, it hurts. I can feel it in a lucid dream. And I'm hugging. But I keep hugging and I'm trying to kind of show them love. And they start shrinking. And I'm like, whoa, this is nuts. They're shrinking. And then again, something I didn't talk about in the TED talk, this song starts playing in the dream. It says, this is how you become five again. This is how you become shadow. This is how you become five again. This is how you become shadow. Little footnote there. Check what Carl Jung said about the emergence of the shadow around the age of 5. Anyway, so this music's playing and they're shrinking. And then it stops. And I release the embrace and I'm hugging myself. This like weird triplet monster thing has turned into me. It looks exactly like me, but I'm like silver, like tinted in silver, like some sort of silver representation. And this me that the monster turned into just went like that, bam, and then I wake up. And you know how some lucid dreams you wake up and it's like, oh, cool, I had a lucid dream. This one was like some big release in my body. I had no idea what it represented, the weird kind of triplet monster thing. But those weird kind of nightmare sexualized dreams, the whole repression thing just stopped right there and then. And then just because it's funny, like a few months later, I saw Rob Nairn again. And I told him this dream and I was like, oh, was that embracing your shadow? And he said, absolutely. But you're crazy, man. I didn't mean literally hug the thing. And I went, oh, but embrace the shadow. And he goes, Charlie, embrace the shadow is a Jungian term meaning to move towards the places that scare you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I thought you meant hug it. But then he went, I've never heard of anyone doing that before. You should do it again. And then, as you know, like a big thing of my teaching is anytime you meet something scary in your lucid dream, hug it. Anytime you meet something monstrous, hug it. Anytime you meet something traumatic, hug it. Because they are monstrous parts of ourselves and a hug maybe it's a hug that we needed that would have prevented that wounding. So now I say, yes, hug your things in your
And you're
dreams.
hugging because that was the instruction you gave me when I was first. I was like,
Yeah.
Charlie, I'm like, I remember the first ever wake-induced lucid dream I had was an accident. I was just practicing lucid dreaming so much. You get into these liminal states. But the first one I had, I went going through sleep paralysis, and then I got sucked in a downward motion into the dream. And the feeling of falling triggered like a nightmare response where I knew I was going to end up in like a graveyard, which is like my biggest
Mm.
fear. And same thing, like in this graveyard, and then I knew like out come the zombies, which is like literally. I know it sounds cliche, but for me, zombies and skeletons were the biggest trigger of my visceral fear. And
Mm.
your advice saved me because this mummy came towards me, and before I could like come up with a conscious reaction, I just was like, just fucking hug it, like just hug
Yeah.
it, and I threw myself at it. I remember just like I was scared and I didn't really know what I was doing, but by just hugging it and holding it and being willing to like do that, it transformed the dream. And so I think in some ways
Mm.
it's the best because to just try embrace something from a distance can be really difficult at first. Like just looking at something scary and sending it waves of compassionate love, like that takes practice to hold the dream to do that. So I love
Yeah.
it. I think your hugging advice has been a game changer. And for anyone who's tiptoeing into this or beginning it, it's the best rule. Charlie's hug it rule.
And as you said there, Mia, the hug, we're not talking about like an A-frame hug, an A-frame kiss. Mwah.
No.
We're talking about boom, a bear hug, which actually also has some power to it. Like if someone ran into the room now, if I was in a room full of people and started attacking people, probably one of the most compassionate way I could deal with the situation, we start bear hug that person, stop them hurting others, stop them hurting themselves. It's a hug, but it's also kind of a container of energy. Um, but yeah, like the hugging thing, I think because we're in a symbolic realm in the dream world, right? So what could be more symbolic of acceptance, of love, of bringing of healing than the hug? Um, just to give another example of when sometimes the hug doesn't work. Um, Again, this a few years ago, doing a lot of shadow work in lucid dreams. I become lucid. I call out for the shadow. So this is something you can do, right? If you get lucid tonight, literally call out for your shadow in the lucid dream. However, seatbelt on. If you become lucid tonight and you call out, shadow, come to me, you have just asked for everything you've been repressing, denying, disowning, all of our fears, traumas, our shames, as well as all of our golden potential to become manifest in form before you. So put your seatbelt on. Totally safe, but put your seatbelt on. So I become lucid, I call out for the shadow. And it was like humanoid, like a human guy, but with the head of a pig, right? Head of a pig, human body, wearing like a security outfit, not like a police outfit, kind of some sort of security guy, right? Um, and by this time, I've done this like dozens of times. I'm okay, it's my shadow, go and hug him. And I move to hug him, and he goes, before I can hug him, he goes, "You will never defeat me. I am your oppressed capacity for violence." Whoa, it spoke so directly. I am your repressed capacity for violence. You will never defeat me. Fuck, man. You hear that? You're like, edit, undo, wake up, wake up, wake up. So I thought, okay, the hug thing probably isn't going to work here. This is the representation of my repressed capacity for violence. Now, as someone who does a lot of martial arts, I thought, okay, actually, I need to kind of make the hug a little bit closer to this guy's language. So I basically kind of grab him and do this like jujitsu throw and like pin him down to the ground, but lovingly. I kind of pin him down to the ground. I want him to feel my strength. I want him to feel how we can communicate through what he is, which is representation of violence. So I kind of throw him to the ground, pin him down. And then for any of the Buddhists out there, I started doing something called Tonglen meditation, which when you breathe in the pain and the suffering of another in the form of dark black smoke, for example, and then you breathe out love and joy and healing in the form of white light. And I pin him down, I do Tonglen on him and go, and the cool thing when you Tonglen in the lucid dream is you see it. You don't need to imagine it. The actual smoke happens, and I breathe him in. And as I breathe him in, he gets smaller. And I was like, shit, this is nuts. I can literally see the integration happening. And I go, and he's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Then he evaporates. Yeah. So in that case, the hug,
But I
the
like,
hug
I
needed
mean,
to be
this
adapted
is
somehow.
from a practical perspective, this is important though, because I think because the dream is a symbolic universe, remembering that even our so-called physical actions are symbolic, right? There is no physicality
Yeah.
going on in there.
Very good.
And so being
Yeah.
willing to adapt when we are working with different aspects of our psyche to think about what would be a symbolic gesture, action, word that would really speak to us, whether it's a shadow integration or you're summoning your inner child. I think, often we do dream plans, dream missions. It's also thinking about like whenever I'm doing a mission where I'm summoning an aspect of my shadow, I feel into that aspect of my shadow. So like
Yeah.
if it's doubt, I think about what would be the antidote for doubt? Like what could I
Mm,
offer doubt when I'm in that dream that's like a compassionate, loving offering? And I know for me,
mm,
like I've had shadow integrations where the integration was like once I had this I was just in a lucid dream and sometimes Charlie you're in a dream and you have a plan, but then some figure shows up and you're like, let's deal with you first.
yep.
And so there was this man who was unhoused and he was so like dirty and I could smell him so strongly and
Mm,
his
mm,
arms were filled with trash and bags and he had like a hat on top of it and he was kind of struggling and the emotional experience was like I had a really strong wave of revulsion. Even lucid, I
mm,
was like, whoa, the
mm.
smell, the like I had this really strong repulsion. And I remember thinking, well, the drill. And like honestly, Charlie, like I was like, he smelled so bad and the emotional feeling was so strong. I was struggling to go and hug him. And so I asked him
Mm,
instead, what can I do for you? And he said, can you
mm.
please put my hat on my head? Because he had his arms full and his hat was on
Huh.
top of all of his stuff. And so I took his hat and like with all of the care and the love and that I could muster
Dignity.
in my heart, I just put the hat back on his head and it created this beautiful transformation. And so it was a symbolic gesture, whatever that aspect of myself was needing. And so I think it's really cool that we can be like responsive and attuned to like whatever is showing up because each piece and because this whole dance is symbolic. And so I think hugging
Yeah.
is a great rule as a beginning part, but part of the fun of shadow work in the dream is you'll find even more nuanced and personalized and sophisticated ways of like interacting with. Have you found that too,
Mm.
Charlie? Kind of the
Yeah, you
language?
actually,
Yeah.
that really touched me, that thing you said about the hat. It
Mm.
was like this sense of dignity.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and often you find people, dispossessed people, people without homes on the street, there'll be something that represents their character, like a certain hat that they wear or a certain thing, the bags they carry, or something that's some relationship to a sense of dignity in such an undignified moment as being without possession or dispossessed or without home. There was something about, oh, can you put my hat on? That really touched me.
Well, for all of
Of
humanity,
like,
like all of humanity, I mean, one of the
yeah,
striking stories after World War II, when the Allies freed the different concentration camps, was there was a lag when the military rolled in and freed the camps, but there still weren't supplies being sent, and they didn't have food yet. Like, and people were sending stuff, but obviously it was just arriving as it arrived. In one of the camps, Banksy actually in one of his books has this as his end note. He tells the story of how a shipment of red lipstick showed up before
oh,
food, and they were like, "Oh God, imagine like everyone's starving and they get bloody lipstick." But there are these pictures of these
useful.
people, yeah, where they put the lipstick on, and they talk about how it did so much to restore the dignity
Mm,
of these
mm,
women in the camps because in that moment they were able to be human again. They were being able to be
mm,
individuals again. So there's quite stunning pictures of, obviously incredibly emaciated women with these beautiful bright red lips and the story of like, and so even in the waking state being a parallel with dreaming state, but symbolism is so important. And so actually
mm.
tying into that, I'm wondering if you'd share, Charlie, like some of like how do you find the integration of working with the shadow in the day can support the night and vice versa? Because I know your work, you've got two great books on shadow work that teach a lot of amazing exercises during the day. For someone, for instance, who's still learning to get lucid, would you recommend they start with some of the day practices? Can that help?
Yes. And also, can I just give one more example about lucid
Yeah,
dream shadow
sure.
work? I don't know. There's something you said there. I don't know. I get these intuitions sometimes that someone in this group might need to hear this particular one. This isn't one of mine, but it is featured in one of my books. My friend Kerry, um, she had wanted to work on the shadow of her relationship with men. And there'd been some abuse in her past that made it very difficult for her to trust men. And this was affecting her relationship with her father, as well as romantic relationship with men and stuff like that. And she made this dream plan to work with the shadow of her relationship with men. And in the dream plan, she had assumed the shadow would turn up as like a ball of red smoke or like something like that, or a monster or something like that. And when she became lucid and called out her sankalpa, her dream plan, she said, "Oh, Charlie, it was worse than any monster. It was him,
Right.
and it was one of the abusers, like looking not symbolic, like exactly as they looked." And just like you said, Mia, she said there was a complete repulsion of wanting to hug this guy. In the dream, she reminded herself, this is not him. This symbolic representation of him that does look like him, but it is not him. I need to move towards this place. It is a wounded part of me. So she moves towards him and hugs him. And just like you said about the smell, she said he smelt the same. I was stuck in my head. She's like, he smelt the same. And she hugged him and was kind of like repelled by doing this, but did it nonetheless. And a bit like in the dream I said, he started shrinking. But this time he shrunk fully. And she went like that, and he was gone. And then she looked down, and there was a swaddled baby, like a newborn baby, like wrapped in this blanket. And she bends down and she picks up this baby and starts rocking him in her arms. And she said, that was then when the healing began. And the first time she told the story, I didn't kind of get it first. So I said, what do you mean? Like, why? And she went, I realized he was once a baby. He wasn't born the abuser that he became. He was once a baby, and something happened to him. Possibly he was who knows, but something happened to him. And the fact she could see him as a baby and not as the abuser that she knew allowed her to start to release some of this trauma that she had been holding. And then when she did that, she's rocking him in the dream. And then a lot of people have had this when they integrate a big shadow in the dream. This big gust of wind came through the dream. I've heard this on not hundreds, but dozens of occasions now. When people do a big kind of fear integration or trauma integration, this wind blows through the dream. Completely unscientific here, total guess or theory on my point. I am sure that is the release of lung or chi or prana, the inner winds that become blocked by trauma. And in that energetic theory anyway, and that when we embrace the shadow or remove that block, literally the winds blow through the dream. Anyway, she woke up and she said when she woke from that dream, her relationship with men changed. She said it was like something just shifted. And the big thing that changed was her relationship with her dad. And she wanted to be really clear, her dad was not involved in any abuse or anything like that. But because of the abuse, it made her difficult to trust her dad, him being the primary male caregiver, right? Um, oh, sorry, I missed something in the dream. She's rocking the baby. She has the realization he was a baby, and then she starts chanting the Om Mani Padme Hum compassion mantra to the baby, and that's when the wind starts. Sorry. So then she finds in the waking state, transform her relationship with her dad, and she taught her dad the mantra. And weirdly, her dad's not into Buddhism at all. They would now chant the mantra together. And like
Wow.
that was the punchline to her dream. I was like, oh, wow. So the stuff you can do here. I shared that one in South Africa once with a therapist. And I remember they went, this is going to change everything. That was 10 years ago. It hasn't changed everything yet, but we've got a lifetime to do it. And to quote James Scurry, a psychotherapist I work with a lot, he said, dreams like that, you can do more in one lucid dream than 100 hours of therapy, maybe 100 years. You can do more in one lucid dream than 100 hours of therapy.
So can you
So it
speak
is
to that? Can
incredibly
you speak to
powerful.
that for a moment? Because I think it's super motivating when we understand why. Like speaking to like why is it so powerful to do these integrations in a dream versus let's say just talking through it cognitively during the day.
Yeah, so well, we could look at kind of the spiritual side and the neuroscience side of it. I mean, from a more kind of spiritual psychological point of view, like in Kerry's case there, um, how long would it have taken for her to be able to get to the point in one-on-one dialogue therapy, kind of Western psychotherapy, to get to the point where she could acknowledge her abuser was once a baby, and because he was once a baby, he was born with a sense of innocence. He wasn't the abuser that he became, and that allowed the sense of release and forgiveness to come in. I mean, maybe if she had a really good therapist, but that's pretty intricate. That's a pretty subtle way of viewing the traumatic thing that happened to her. And yet the dream gave it to her in this like image. It was so obvious. It was so symbolic. It made it so clear for her. Um, uh, what needed to the insight that needed to occur for her to be able to release some of that trauma. So I think in that way it's very, very direct. It's so direct. But also from a kind of neuroscientific point of view, we know that for trauma, and this is for someone I really truly believe in Western talk therapy for many things, but for trauma it very often comes out very low. Like when you look at things that are really good for integrating trauma, the somatic therapies come up way above. Lucid dreaming comes up way high too, but talk therapy is not so good for trauma because, of course, the part of the brain that is knocked out during traumatic experience, the prefrontal cortex, works in language, which is why using language to integrate trauma kind of falls beneath the radar. The trauma gets stuck in a part of the brain that is accessed through the breath and the body, and also accessed through lucid dreaming. Bessel van der Kolk was very clear. He said, for trauma to be fully integrated, the parts of the brain that were knocked out during the traumatic experience, the prefrontal cortex, need to come back online in a safe space while we are regulating the parts of the brain that remember, as in the amygdala and the mammalian parts of the brain. Now, of course, what happens when we become lucid? You've got the back part of the brain, the amygdala, all of the kind of older parts of the brain are very active when we dream. When we become lucid, what part of the brain switches on? Prefrontal cortex, which absolutely chimes with what Bessel van der Kolk is saying, that the prefrontal cortex comes back online in the safe space of the lucid dream, is able to witness that traumatic experience from the present, knowing it's not back in the past, it's not a replay, you are now in the lucid dream. So, and we think actually when we did those two studies on trauma, that's the kind of biological underpinning of how one lucid dream seems to be such a powerful integration of trauma.
I love that. That's a really beautiful explanation. I think it'll go towards the first question we're going to dive into, but I think there's something
Sorry,
about
Mia, and you asked a question before this, which I diverted to tell
ah.
that story about Kerry.
No, 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 it's fine. I think let's keep going this direction because I
Sure.
want to make sure we have time for a few questions. So maybe before we take questions, actually, would you like to just give like for someone who would like to start with some shadow work in their dreams, what would you recommend? And obviously, you say you can call out for your whole shadow, but maybe that's not the best place to start. How would you advise people move forward with it?
It's interesting. I say that, and I said it kind of with a glint in my eye. Put on your seatbelt if you call out for your shadow. However, actually, I mean, for the first like 5 years, I was just becoming lucid and calling out shadow come to me because I wasn't really aware that you could do stuff like become lucid and call out for the sexual shadow, call out for the teenage shadow, call out for the shadow of my fear of spiders. You can be very specific. So actually, for many years, I was just calling out for the shadow. In that case, you're kind of you're letting the dreamer decide.
Mm.
You're saying, hey, dreamer, whatever part of my shadow you think I most need to see right now, you let me know. And then actually, there's something about trusting that intelligence, what Jung called the intelligence of the conscious unconscious. He said, which strives for balance within the psychic apparatus, constantly moving between dark and light. So actually, to become lucid and just call out for shadow can be a great thing to do. Often people think, oh, well, I'll call out for the golden shadow, because that'll
Less
be soft, it'll
scary.
be easy. Yeah. I'll tell you what, the one time on one of my lucid dreaming retreats that someone has woken up the rest of the group screaming in the middle of the night was someone meeting their golden shadow in a lucid dream. She like wasn't up for the dark shadow. She's like, oh no, I don't want to meet my kind of inner demons and stuff. No, no, I'm not ready for that. I want to meet my inner gold, and of course the golden shadow would be your your Buddha nature, your oppressed divinity, that kind of thing. So she becomes lucid. She calls out, golden shadow, come to me. And this huge golden Buddha, like the size of a freaking mountain, goes out of the ground in front of her. And she has it so awesome in the classical use of the word. It was terrifying, like looking at the eyes of God, and she woke up screaming. So I don't know, meeting your golden shadow, your true potential can be just as shocking, can be just as scary. But what I would say is people make a dream plan. Make a dream plan. We write it in my next lucid dream. I call out to meet my shadow. And then you can do the small print. The shadow that are presented to me is a shadow that I can easily work with in the waking state that does not overwhelm me, that is exactly what I need to see for my personal growth at this moment. You can put the small print in your dream plan. Um, but yeah, call out to see what the shadow gives you.
Mm.
You could be specific. You could call out to meet your sexual shadow, your teenage shadow, your childhood shadow, if there's a specific thing that you want to work with. Um, yeah, I can't think of actually any examples I can give you where people have done that and then they've gone, I really regretted that. The shadow was way too big. It totally overwhelmed me. I have zero examples of that actually,
Mhm.
which is pretty good because people definitely would have
And
told
even with
me.
shadows that are scary, like I know when I was working with my sexual shadow, the first two times. I think we were working together at this time, Charlie. You were
You
helping
were
me
doing
guide me through the
amazing. That was when we were
process.
doing the one-on-ones, wasn't it? That was
Yeah.
crazy, man. That
And
series of dreams you had.
and it took three times because the first two times I just got scared and woke up. And that's the worst that's going to happen is like
Yeah,
it feels too much and you wake up. And I kept
yeah,
going back and then the third one I managed to get into it. It was fantastic, right? So I think you're right, Charlie, where it's like this is maybe where I think with the shadow work, it's really important to develop a strong sense of safety and equanimity inside of yourself as you prepare,
hmm
because what
hmm
it requires of us is compassion and courage. So knowing that, oh, when I'm going to work with my shadow, taking a moment before you go to sleep, or even in a lucid dream, before you call it out, taking a moment to anchor into, ah, I'm in a lucid dream. I'm fully safe. I can
yeah,
bring my compassionate, courageous heart online. I trust I can face anything that comes to me. And so
yeah.
building that sense of inner strength and capacity first, and then you'll find that whatever comes, like you are able to hold all of it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course your dreamer is listening now. We have this idea that our dreamer, that intelligence that creates the dream, like only comes out at night. Of course, the dreamer is our higher self, right? So it's listening now. And your dreamer is probably already going, "Ooh, I'm going to use this bit for their first lucid dream. Like this is a real blind spot they need to work with right now. Wait, it's the first ever lucid dream of shadow, but I don't want to freak them out. I'm just going to bring a little bit in here too. Like the dreamer doesn't want you to give up on lucid dream shadow work. So if it's your first time, trust that your dreamer will be kind and give you what you need to see. Like it might be shocking, and it might even be scary, but it won't be too much. It won't. The psyche won't work to overwhelm you. Overwhelm comes from unintegrated shadow. So there will be no shadow that's offered to you that is too overwhelming. Shadow integration is about integrating overwhelm. So trust in that process. Oh, and just some examples of this. Your dreamer will block it. Like if you try and do something too much. A friend of mine, Maxwell Hunter, done brilliant stuff with voice hearers and people with multiple personality display or disorder. In one of his lucid dreams, he tried to meet one of his alters, his voices. It was too early. It would have been disruptive to mental health. So when he called it out in the dream, a big sign appeared in the dream, neon pink sign that said access denied, access denied, access denied. A few years later, after he'd done the brilliant spiritual work he's been doing and working with the therapist, he did the same thing. This time, no access denied. He had a powerful integrating lucid dream. When I tried to do it with the golden shadow, I tried to visit nirvana or this guy Dewa Chen, but think of it like visiting a nirvanic realm. And when I tried to call that out in the lucid dream, it was too gold. Would have blown my mind. This woman appeared with a clipboard and went, Dewa Chen, nah, you're not ready for that. And I woke up. So there
No
seems to be
visa.
something in there that knows what you're ready for. So
Yeah.
trust in that too.
Yeah, and I see that over and over again with people as well, and in my personal experience. So that's the part of the trusting the relationship you have with the dreaming mind, and
Yeah.
really celebrating that it is a collaborative experience, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now we have about 10 minutes per question. So I'm going to start with the
Oh,
question
literally
from
just looked at the time.
I know, just
That is time
so
bending.
there's a question in the chat I'm going to start with, but if you have a
I
question,
thought we'd been
you
going
can
for
raise
about
your
half an
hand.
hour,
No, Charlie, we just chitty chat.
ranting about a subject I'm passionate about, and
It's so
time will fly. Yeah. Sorry, I know I've talked a lot. I hope I haven't talked you
so
into boredom, people.
no, I don't. I see some good wide open experiences. So, question from Doug: how does hugging my repressed capacity for violence actually integrate it as a shadow? It seems like the first step. I acknowledge and embrace that I have a capacity for violence that I've previously rejected, but the integration would involve you actually acknowledging and something your ability to maim and hurt and violate other beings, that there may be rage inside,
Feeling.
your opponent's feeling. Okay, feeling cool. So there may be the integration would involve actually acknowledging and feeling your ability to maim and hurt
Yeah.
and violate other beings, that there may be rage inside you or potency to hurt another being that's just as real as your ability to love another being, that the process
Yes.
is generally more of a journey, not just a simple hug or tonglen process. So
You would
curious.
think so. Yeah. In the waking state, absolutely. We
And
have to
yet
go
in
through that
dreams,
cognitive process. But in the lucid dream, somehow that hug, I think this is what the therapist meant by you can do more in one lucid dream than 100 hours of therapy. It's weird. In the lucid dream, you don't need to go through that cognitive process. And that is bizarre. And that's why when we did the study with the PTSD study, we had 85% of people by the end of 1 week beneath the PTSD threshold. And these crazy findings.
Mhm.
So there is something about the lucid dream state that kind of bypasses it. And I don't know why. It makes no sense psychologically because surely you would have to witness the process exactly as Doug just said. But somehow in the lucid dream, it kind of bypasses it. And I don't know how, um, other than witnessing the transformation that has occurred.
I have a theory too that because there's so much energy we hold when we're rejecting or repressing something. So let's say it's around violence. Anytime you see something violent, or there's this instinctive like contraction rejection, which means that we never actually change our behavior around it. I think when we do the
Mm,
integration in the dream, our ability to relate to it differently in waking state completely opens up because the emotional charge is gone. So
yeah, yeah.
instead of being like that in the waking state as a kind of compulsive reflex, I think we're actually able to do maybe more of the actual like rehabituation and kind of trait building during the day because we no longer have that kind of like energetic obstacle to it too.
Yeah. And from a Buddhist point of view, of course, they would be very answered very easily. They say in the lucid dream state, you have 7 times the power of mind. So anything done in the lucid dream is like 7 times more powerful.
Mhm.
So it seems that some sort of, Tonglen in the lucid dream would be kind of, 7 times more powerful than Tonglen in the waking state. Who knows?
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, just for
Is
clarification?
this Doug? Doug, is that you?
Yes.
Yeah, sure,
Yes,
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
me,
absolutely. Yeah,
Doug.
yeah, yeah. Jump up.
Thank you.
Doug, you look
Uh,
like a dreaming Buddha like
It
that,
does, yeah.
doesn't it? You know, the dreaming Buddha thing.
In the cosmos.
Yeah.
Oh, you've
Oh, you're
muted
muted,
yourself. Hang
Doug.
on.
in the past, when I've done this kind of work, I asked the shadow thing to transform itself into something that I could interact with, something that was
Mm,
clear as to what it represented. And that started the kind of journey that I suggested, which was actually pretty intense and emotionally, disturbing, but with some work integrated and accepted.
uh-huh.
And so I'm a clinical psychologist, and
Ah,
I did this kind of work like 20 or 30 years ago when I was first starting out in the area. And what I've learned, is that there are some processes, like if you go get a deep tissue massage, you can release and cry out a whole bunch of pain and trauma that you've kept in your body for decades. And that's a deeply healing experience, except you lose the wisdom of actually knowing what the trauma was, and the integration that's sort of forced when you interact with it at that more cognitive level. And so I'm just wondering, if do you feel like the process that you're suggesting also gives you the wisdom of having gone through the journey of transformation as opposed to just the outcome?
very
Mm.
good point. No, not in all cases. I've had experience where I've integrated the shadow in a lucid dream, and the only way I've known that the process is being completed was my triggers didn't go off.
Yeah.
I'm just no
Yeah.
longer triggered by that thing. So I know it's happened, but I didn't know at the time that that's what that shadow represented. It was only retrospectively I was like, oh shit. So maybe that shadow that I hugged like 2 weeks ago must have been the shadow that represented this trigger around this was actually a class thing, but it was around kind of a British class structure and stuff like that. But I noticed the trigger wasn't going off anymore. So I had to assume retrospectively that possibly that was the lucid dream that did it. But
Yeah.
yeah, who knows for sure? But kind of I'm of the thinking like I don't know if I need to know which shadow it was cognitively. I would like
Well,
to, it'd be interesting intellectually, but I'm not sure. I think if I had a choice, I would rather integrate it than know what it is.
But you cool.
yeah.
But that's when you can just ask the question, right, Charlie? This is where it's a really fun thing to add into the dream plan. When the shadow arrives, like ask first thing, ask it, what do you represent?
Yeah.
And
Like
then you
that one who
can,
said,
and
I was
then
violence. And
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I've had so many shadow aspects appear, and I've been like, yeah, cognitively, I'm like, what the fuck is this? But you ask it, and like, it'll give you its exact representation,
Mm,
and you're like,
mm,
so then
mm.
you can, like saying, Doug, it's like maybe getting the best of both worlds, where you're having the full integrated release, and there's like the kind of cognitive understanding of like, that's what that represented. Great question.
Right.
Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so from Caitlin, what if someone is having too many nightmares every night to even think about getting lucid? Where should they start?
Mm. I think the first thing to do is to reframe what nightmares are trying to do. Like we have this idea that nightmares are somehow a sign of a broken mind, or that they're a sign that we are kind of effed up by what happened to us. In fact, in many cases, the nightmare is a sign that the mind is healing. It's like an immune response from it. But the more we reject nightmares and try and get rid of them, the louder they shout. You know, a nightmare is a dream that's shouting. It's shouting to draw our attention to some wounded part of the psyche, in the same way as pain shouts to tell the brain, "Hey, I've just cut my arm," or whatever it is. So I'd say first thing to do is to try and maybe reframe our view of what nightmares are trying to do, and without a hard sell on the book. Pretty much all my books have a big section on this, literally called "Reframing Nightmares." So that might be a place to explore. And also, when the time comes that you feel ready to explore lucid dreaming with nightmares, over a third of spontaneous lucid dreams reported begin as nightmares. Nightmares are actually far easier to become lucid in than non-nightmarish dreams. They believe it's because of fear heightening our sense of emotions. You know, when you get really scared, you kind of become more attuned. And also scary dreams might tend to have more dream signs, so it can be easier to become lucid. But nightmares are great places to become lucid. And of course, once you become lucid in a nightmare, you are in the shadow. You don't need to become lucid nightmare and then call for the shadow. You are in shadow world. You know, nightmares are expressions of unintegrated shadow. So they can be brilliant, brilliant opportunities. And also for someone who's really suffered from nightmares. That's how I got onto this path at 17, right? Like full on PTSD nightmares. I'm aware that that can feel really easier said than done. So I want to acknowledge my heart opens to you. Nightmares are fucking horrible. They are horrible, horrible, horrible. And also, if you were to ask me, one of the most powerful ways to integrate nightmares currently available, lucid dreaming, without doubt. It's free, it's non-addictive, it's non-invasive, it's non-medical. You literally do it in your sleep. And we now have research to show it is one of the most powerful integrative tools for chronic nightmares.
And I just want to say that there's a bunch of questions around your actual shadow books. I know this is your latest one, right, Charlie? Do you do the
Yeah,
shadow?
so this is like daytime shadow work. So this has no lucid dreaming stuff in it. So please do not buy this if you want lucid dreaming shadow work. This is for daytime shadow work practices.
Super
So
cool.
creative writing exercises, art therapy exercises, inner child exercises, working with masks, working with mirrors, working with ancestral shadow, looking at the sexual shadow, but no lucid dreaming here.
And
So if you are
your
already lucid dreaming, then this is a good one.
and your lucid dreaming one is, oh, it's not on here anymore?
Oh,
You-
Dreaming Through Darkness.
Yeah.
Oh, it
Is
that
it
is very
still
strange. It's
around?
not coming up. Yeah. If you go click on books.
I did. That's not there. Look,
Oh.
books.
Oh no, click actually on books. There it
Ah,
is.
okay, here, yeah. So this is the one that I went through probably, gosh, I mean, years ago. It's cool because it's a kind of a fusion of lucid dreaming and shadow work. So
Yeah,
if
that's the lucid
you're,
dreaming and shadow work. So probably
yeah,
for this group, that one's more relevant actually, because then
yeah.
you get all the shadow work practices, but all lucid dreaming stuff too.
Let me put this in the chat for everyone. I know we're at time, so I apologize. I wish we could have got through more questions, but that's I also send it out with the replay for those who want to explore. Charlie's books are amazing. Like he's an incredible teacher in general, but he's an incredible author. I really your ability to distill pretty significant concepts and put them into very practical exercises is phenomenal. So if you're
Because of
curious to take extra
dyslexia.
steps, that's right. No, it's a
Like as a
superpower, isn't
dyslexic, I'm like,
it?
if I can't understand it, no one can understand it.
But it's good. That's the level you kind of want when you're doing this sort of work. So amazing. Well, thank you, Charlie, so much for coming on and just for sharing with us and sharing all your incredible stories. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to see you. And thank you,
Oh,
everyone, for
thank you,
joining
Mia.
us today.
Oh, and Mia, if anyone's interested in doing the same retreat that Mia did, lucid dreaming and
Yes.
shadow work, my next one next year in May the 7th to the 10th in Glastonbury in the UK.
Oh,
It will be up
wow.
online like tomorrow. It should be up online now, but
I'll make
I
sure
did.
I send the link out for that. Charlie's retreats are fantastic. Again, just like it's if you haven't done an in-person lucid dreaming retreat or shadow work retreat, any of them, honestly, I highly recommend it because you get a immersive energetic container and Charlie's a
Yeah.
master at holding it, which is always an accelerator. So if that's something that you are interested in or able to do, I highly recommend it.
Cool.
Fantastic. All right, friends. Well, we'll see
Thank
you
you,
next month.
everybody.
Yeah, take care,
Thanks, Mia.
everybody. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.